Have you ever wondered, is it easier for God to create all the intricacies of the universe? Or is it just as easy for me to feel the forgiveness of sin and guilt that I have been engaged in? This is the crux of Genesis 18, through the most important question asked almost in the entire scriptures from today's passage. Genesis 18 in verses 14 through to 15. Is there anything too hard for the Lord? And I wonder whether sometimes you're a little like myself. That is, it's sometimes easier to believe that God is the author of all creation than it is for me to feel the depth of forgiveness that he himself has given me through Jesus Christ. This is the crux of the problem for humanity and the crux of the problem that Sarah and Abraham have been facing as well. So let us pause and read Genesis 18, 1 through 15 together, and then come back to the passage. Genesis 18 from verse 1 through to verse 15. The Lord appeared to Abram near the great trees of Mamre while he was still sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may wash all your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed, and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered, "do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he replied, "get 3 seahs of finest flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There, in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I'm worn out, my Lord is old. Will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child, now that I'm old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." As you finish that reading from Genesis 18, 1 through 15, it hopefully brought to mind the occasion that Abram had already had the promise delivered to him about the child, but Sarah has not really been a participant in that particular promise herself. And if you recall previously in Genesis, when Abram had received a promise, he himself both laughed and disobeyed. And what we normally see in the follow-up passage is Sarah exhibiting the same sinful characteristics. That is what we see here. Sarah laughs like Abram laughed. Sarah doubts like Abram doubts. And maybe that reflects to us that we doubt the promises of God, especially when they're personal promises. It is easier sometimes to believe that God delivers his promises to other people. Other people can have miraculous things happen to them. But me, I'm unworthy, undeserving, too much doubt, and I don't really feel it as well. And so Abram is dealing and wrestling with this concept in Genesis 18 as well as Sarah. It begins by the Lord turning up. The Lord is the author of his promises, and the Lord is the enactor of those promises. We may be participants, but it is all the Lord's work. Abram demonstrates his hospitality and love of people, and he takes care of the visitors. But the crux of the passage really ramps up through the back half of our reading today as we get to verse 9, where the Lord's servant here, the Lord asks, "Where is your wife Sarah?" They asked him, "There in the tent." And then the promise that had been previously iterated to Abram is now spoken in Sarah's presence, and she has the same reaction. She laughs. And the response being, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Now, I, and maybe you, are the same as Sarah, and that is we doubt. We have personal doubts that God will work personally through us in amazing ways. We may see revivals happen all throughout the world. We hear of great testimonies of people coming to faith, and we go, isn't that amazing? But yet we doubt that the Lord can work personally in our lives. Now, Sarah's doubts are both like that and slightly different. The likeness is the idea that God can work personally through us, but the difference is that the natural world had seemingly told her that she can't have children. It's impossible, naturally speaking. It needs a supernatural event. But because she hasn't seen these supernatural events, how could she believe that this would be happening? And so it's more about us bringing our doubts, our fears, our anxieties, our limitations that we place on God before Him in prayer, asking that His promises that He has said will come true will be delivered through us. Now, it's not merely us imagining that, Lord, for all intensive purposes, I can't get a Ferrari, so Lord, please grant me that. Because as far as I can tell in the scriptures, that's not a promise that God has given me. And so by me asking that promise is me making it up, really. But are there promises that God has given us that we doubt? Now, this is what we would need to bring to Him in prayer. The promise of forgiveness, the promise of restoration to relationship with Him, the promise of guilt and shame being wiped away from the way we feel about ourselves. Those promises that God has given are actually exhibited through the Lord Jesus and by the Holy Spirit. Now, if we doubt those promises, it means we're not really grasping the depth of God's love and forgiveness for us. But we all sometimes, sadly, engaged in that way of thinking. And Sarah's a good reminder to us here that the promises of God are able to be fulfilled by us trusting in Him, yes, but by God enabling them to occur, because Sarah is working with God here, but God is the chief actor, of course. So is anything too hard for God? Of course not. The only things that are too hard for God are things that are not part of His character, like destroy the universe, like to say Jesus is not Lord. Those things are more than too hard for God because they're impossible. But if things are possible for God, then they are actually able to be done by Him. And it's for us to bask in that glory to allow Him to do so. And so it continues on in another section that we can skip. And it's a reminder that God is a loving and forgiving God, because Sarah lied to God, expecting somehow to get away with it. But we're all like that, aren't we? It reminds me of Peter in his confession that he did not know the Christ just before Jesus' crucifixion on the cross. We sometimes get caught with our hand in the cookie jar and then want to say, I didn't do it. Sarah says, I didn't do it. It's our instinctive reaction. It's a sinful reaction that she didn't laugh when God made a promise, that she didn't lie when she knows she did. We're all like that. We all self-justify our behavior. We'd lie to God. We'd lie to ourselves. But the answer is never to treat that with the respect it deserves. In other words, just bask in it, ignore it, self-justify it. No, it's then to bring that to God, like Peter did afterwards when the Lord Jesus came and approached him in John 21. He brought those sins before his heavenly Father through Christ, and we can do the same. That we may have lied to God in the past, we may have self-justified our sin in the past, we may have ignored the promises of God in the past, but it doesn't mean you have to do it right now. Because God's word speaks to you in the present, because his Son is alive, the Holy Spirit is always effectual to bring forgiveness and bring the promises of God into reality through your life. It begins by you bringing those lies, bringing those fears, bringing that doubt, bringing the sense of ignoring God before him in prayer, and asking that all of that be wiped away through Jesus Christ and his death for you on the cross. And that is exactly what the power of the Spirit will do for you. Like Sarah, you will need to realize that you lied, but unlike Sarah, you can't just rely upon guilt to stay away. You can't just rely upon self-justification to give you calmness. No, those only bring judgment. And the only way to forestall and remove is through Christ and him alone. Amen.